The sound of unfamiliar laughter echoed through Simone's house as she stood frozen in her own doorway, suitcase still in hand. She'd cut her business conference short, feeling anxious to get home. Now she understood why. Through the gap in the living room door, she could see her husband Brandon sprawled on their couch. A blonde woman sat beside him, her legs draped across his lap. They were drinking wine from Simone's wedding crystal. "Once we get her to sign the divorce papers, everything will be smooth," Brandon said, his voice carrying that confident tone Simone once found attractive. "She has no idea the company's real value. She'll take whatever settlement I offer." The blonde woman, Natasha, Simone realized, recognizing her from the company holiday party, laughed. "Poor thing probably thinks she's set for life. If she only knew you've been moving assets for months." Simone's hand tightened on her suitcase handle. She built that company. Every late night, every risk, every innovation had been hers. Brandon just smiled for investors and played golf with clients. The best part? Brandon poured more wine. "She's so trusting. She signed every paper I put in front of her. The new operating agreement, the loan documents, everything. She has no idea she signed away her stake." "When will you tell her?" Natasha asked. "After the Vegas trip next week. I'll have our lawyers serve her papers at work. Maximum embarrassment. She'll be so desperate to avoid a scene she'll sign anything." Natasha kissed his neck. "You're terrible. I love it." "She's weak," Brandon said. "Always has been. She'll probably cry and beg me to work it out. That's when I'll tell her about you. About us. She'll be so broken she won't even fight the settlement." Simone backed away from the door carefully. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Years of running a tech company had taught her to control her reactions, to think clearly under pressure. She walked quietly back outside and got in her car. Only when she was 3 blocks away did she let herself feel the full weight of what she'd heard. Brandon wasn't just cheating. He was stealing from her. He'd planned to destroy her financially and emotionally. But he'd made one critical mistake. He thought she was weak. He thought she was stupid. He had no idea what she was really capable of. Simone pulled into a hotel parking lot and made her first phone call. "Robert? It's Simone. I need you to prepare the documents we discussed last year. Yes, all of them. I want everything ready by Monday morning." Her lawyer, Robert Chin? No, wait, she needed to use different names. Her lawyer, Robert Mitchell's voice was calm. "What happened?" "I'll explain later. Right now, I need you to freeze all company accounts and prepare to file fraud charges." "How long will it take?" "If you have evidence, I can have injunctions filed by Monday afternoon." "I have evidence," Simone said. Her voice was ice. "I have 2 years of evidence. He just didn't know I was collecting it." She made 3 more calls. Her accountant. Her financial advisor. Her oldest friend who happened to be a federal prosecutor. By the time she checked into the hotel, the machinery was in motion. In her room, Simone opened her laptop. She'd been monitoring the company accounts for 18 months, ever since she noticed small discrepancies. Brandon thought he was clever, moving money in tiny amounts. But Simone had built the company's financial software. She coded a backdoor that tracked every transaction, every transfer, every penny that moved. She had spreadsheets, screenshots, email backups, bank records. Everything she needed to prove Brandon had been embezzling for 2 years. He'd stolen $3 million. Moved it through shell corporations and offshore accounts. He'd forged her signature on loan documents, putting the company in debt while he pocketed the money. He'd even mortgaged their house without her knowledge. But there was something Brandon didn't know. Something Simone had kept secret their entire marriage. She wasn't just a software developer who got lucky with one company. She was the daughter of the late tech pioneer Evelyn Hart, who'd left Simone a trust fund worth $50 million. Simone had used that money to found their company 5 years ago, but she'd done it through a shell corporation. On paper, Brandon's business partner E. Hart Holdings owned 60% of the company. Brandon thought E. Hart was some mysterious investor who stayed silent and let him run things. He had no idea he'd been working for his wife the whole time. Simone had set it up that way deliberately. She'd watched her mother get destroyed in a divorce, watched her father's business partners steal everything after her death. Simone had learned to protect herself. She'd made one mistake though. She'd fallen in love with Brandon. She trusted him. She thought his charm was genuine and his ambition was something they shared. Now she knew the truth. He'd seen her as a target from the beginning. He'd married her for the company, stayed with her until he figured out how to steal it, and planned to discard her the moment he had everything. But he'd been stealing from himself. Every dollar he took from her company. And now she was going to take it all back. Simone opened a new document and began typing. By dawn she had a complete strategy. Legal action. Corporate restructuring. Criminal charges. Asset seizure. She knew exactly how to dismantle everything Brandon thought he'd built. He wanted to serve her divorce papers at work? Fine. She'd serve him with criminal charges first. He thought she'd cry and beg? He was about to learn who she really was. The woman he'd underestimated was about to become his worst nightmare. Simone sat in her hotel room as morning light filtered through the curtains. She hadn't slept, but she wasn't tired. Adrenaline and purpose kept her sharp. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Where are you? Your car's not here. She deleted it without responding. Let him wonder. Let him start to worry. She ordered room service and opened her laptop. Time to review everything one more time before she unleashed it all. The company, Technova Solutions, had started in her apartment 5 years ago. Simone had been 28, recently finished with her master's degree in computer science, and full of ideas for streamlining corporate data management. She'd written the first software version in 3 months, working 20-hour days. Brandon had been her boyfriend then, charming and supportive. He'd encouraged her to quit her job and focus on the business. He'd introduced her to potential clients through his network. He'd seemed like the perfect partner. When the company needed capital to scale, Simone had used her trust fund. But she'd been careful. She'd created E-Heart Holdings, named after her mother Evelyn, and structured it so the ownership was hidden behind layers of corporate paperwork. Only her lawyer and accountant knew the truth. Brandon thought he was so smart when he proposed marriage. Simone had seen the calculation in his eyes, but she'd convinced herself she was wrong. She'd wanted to believe in love. They'd married in a small ceremony. Simone had kept her last name, Hart, professionally, but legally became Simone Warren. Another layer of separation between her personal life and her business empire. The company had grown fast. Within 2 years they had 50 employees and contracts with major corporations. Brandon had transitioned from salesperson to chief operating officer. Simone stayed in the background, the technical genius nobody really noticed. She preferred it that way. But 18 months ago she'd noticed something wrong. A client payment hadn't shown up in their main account. When she'd investigated, she found it had been deposited into a separate account she didn't recognize. She'd said nothing. Instead, she'd started watching. Documenting. Building a case. Brandon had gotten sloppy. He'd started taking more. Bigger amounts. He'd created fake vendor accounts and paid them for services that never happened. He'd approved bonuses for employees who didn't exist. He'd even charged personal expenses to company credit cards. Simone had captured it all. Every transaction. Every fake invoice. Every forged approval. She'd also discovered Natasha wasn't just some random affair. She worked for a competing tech company. She'd been feeding Brandon's stolen money back into her employer's business. This wasn't just infidelity and embezzlement. It was corporate espionage. Simone's phone rang. Robert Mitchell, her lawyer. I've reviewed everything you sent, he said. This is substantial. We're talking federal charges. Wire fraud, embezzlement, possibly even racketeering if we can prove ongoing conspiracy. Can we freeze everything today? Simone asked. I can file emergency injunctions Monday morning. The accounts will be frozen by noon. But Simone, are you sure? Once we start this, there's no going back. Your marriage. My marriage ended the moment he decided to steal from me, Simone said. Her voice was steady. He wanted to humiliate me, destroy me financially, and leave me with nothing. I'm just returning the favor. All right. I'll prepare everything. Meet me at my office Monday at 8. After she hung up, Simone made another call. This one to her friend Denise, who worked as a prosecutor for the Federal White-Collar Crime Division. I need advice, Simone said. Hypothetically, if someone discovered their spouse was embezzling from a company they secretly own. Nothing hypothetical about this, is there? Denise interrupted. Talk to me, Simone. What's going on? Simone told her everything. When she finished, Denise was silent for a long moment. You've been collecting evidence for 18 months? Yes. And you never confronted him? I wanted to make sure I had everything. That there was no way he could talk his way out or destroy evidence. Smart. Very smart. Denise paused. Here's what you need to know. With the amounts you're describing and the interstate transfers, this is definitely federal jurisdiction. If you want to pursue criminal charges, I can connect you with the right people. But it will be public. Messy. Are you prepared for that? He was planning to serve me divorce papers at work to embarrass me, Simone said. I'm prepared for anything. Okay. Send me copies of everything through secure channels. I'll review it and see what we can do. Simone spent the rest of Saturday organizing files. She created a comprehensive timeline. She made copies of everything, physical and digital. She prepared for war. Sunday morning, she drove past her house. Brandon's car was there. So was Natasha's. They were living in her home, sleeping in her bed, drinking her wine. Not for much longer. She went to her office. The building was empty on weekends. She used her key card to access the executive floor and went to her real office. Not the small development room everyone thought was hers, but the corner office that technically belonged to eHeart Holdings. She designed this office herself. Soundproof. Secure. A private space where she could work without interruption. Brandon had never even asked who used it. Simone sat at the massive desk and looked out over the city. Somewhere down there, Brandon was probably laughing. Probably planning his Vegas trip. Probably celebrating what he thought was his clever scheme. He had no idea that tomorrow, everything would change. She opened her company laptop and began preparing one final document. An executive memo that would go out to all employees Monday morning, signed by eHeart Holdings, revealing the ownership structure and announcing immediate leadership changes. When she finished, Simone leaned back in her chair. She felt calm, focused, ready. Brandon had wanted to take everything from her. Instead, he was about to lose it all. And the beautiful part? He'd done it to himself. Every dollar he stole, every lie he told, every document he forged, it had all built the cage he was about to find himself trapped in. Simone closed her laptop and stood up. She had one more stop to make before tomorrow. She drove to the storage unit she'd rented last month. Inside were boxes of her personal belongings. Everything that mattered to her. Photos of her mother. Her grandmother's jewelry. Her important documents. Books. Mementos. She'd moved them out piece by piece over the past month, whenever Brandon was gone. He'd never noticed. Now the house could burn down for all she cared. It held nothing she valued. As she drove back to her hotel, her phone buzzed again. Another text from Brandon. Getting worried. Call me. Simone smiled. Let him worry. By this time tomorrow, worry would be the least of his problems. Monday morning arrived bright and cold. Simone woke at 5, dressed in her best suit, a sharp charcoal gray that meant business, and drove to her lawyer's office. Robert Mitchell was already there, looking exhausted. I've been up all night, he said. But it's ready. All of it. He spread papers across his conference table. Injunctions. Fraud claims. Criminal referrals. Corporate resolutions. Divorce petitions. The injunctions will freeze all personal and business accounts associated with Brandon Warren, Robert explained. The fraud claims document everything he's stolen. The criminal referrals go to the FBI and state prosecutor. The corporate resolutions remove him from all positions at Technova and revoke his access. And the divorce? Simone asked. Filed this morning. You're claiming fraud, claiming all marital assets are separate property based on the prenuptial agreement he violated, and seeking full ownership of the house, cars, everything. Given his criminal activity, you'll get it. We had a prenup? Simone asked, confused. Robert smiled. You did. You just didn't know it. Remember that paperwork you signed before the wedding? The document Brandon told you was just the marriage license application? Simone's eyes widened. That was a prenuptial agreement? A very comprehensive one. It stated that all property owned before the marriage remains separate, and any business assets are protected from division. It also included a fraud clause. If either party engages in fraud against the other, they forfeit all claims to marital property. But I never read it. Which is why Brandon's fraud is even more egregious. He deliberately misrepresented what you were signing. That's another crime, by the way. Fraud in the inducement. Simone sat down heavily. He planned this from the beginning. It appears so. But he made a critical error. He didn't know about eHeart Holdings. He thought he was stealing from a company he partially owned. In reality, he was stealing from your company, which makes it straight theft. At 8 sharp, they filed the injunctions with the court. By 9, they'd been approved. By 10, every bank account associated with Brandon Warren was frozen. At 10:30, Simone walked into Technova's headquarters building. She rode the elevator to the executive floor, her heart pounding but her face calm. Brandon's assistant looked up in surprise. Mrs. Warren? Mr. Warren said you were out of town. I need to speak with my husband, Simone said. Is he in? He's in a meeting, but... Simone walked past her and opened Brandon's office door. He was on the phone, feet up on his desk. He nearly dropped the phone when he saw her. "I'll call you back," he said quickly and hung up. His smile was forced. "Honey, you're back. Where have you been?" "We need to talk," Simone said. "Of course. Sit down." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. The chair where he'd probably planned to make her sit while he destroyed her life. Simone remained standing. "I know about Natasha." Brandon's face went pale, then recovered. "I don't know what you... I know about the money you've stolen. The fake accounts. The offshore transfers. All of it." His jaw tightened. "You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Why don't we..." "I'm thinking very clearly," Simone said. "Probably for the first time in years. You've been embezzling from Technova. You've been planning to steal the company and leave me with nothing. You've been living with your mistress in our house." Brandon stood up. "Okay, fine. You found out. But before you do anything stupid, you should know that I own this company now. I've restructured everything. You have no power here anymore." "Really?" Simone pulled out her phone and made a call. "Robert, we're ready." She put the phone on speaker. Robert's voice filled the office. "Brandon Warren, you're being served with notice of immediate termination from Technova Solutions, effective immediately. You're also being served with injunctions freezing all your personal and business accounts, pending investigation of fraud and embezzlement charges. The FBI will be contacting you shortly." Brandon's face went from pale to red. "You can't do this. I own 40% of this company." "Actually," Simone said calmly, "you own nothing. Hart Holdings owns 60%. I own another 20% personally. You were granted a 10% stake as compensation, which is now forfeit due to your criminal activity. Hart Holdings is a silent investor." Brandon shouted. "They never interfere." Hart Holdings," Simone said, "is me. It always has been. I founded this company. I funded it. I built it. You were just the pretty face I hired to schmooze clients." The realization dawned on Brandon's face slowly. "No, that's not possible. You're just a developer. You don't have that kind of money." "My mother was Evelyn Hart. She left me a $50 million trust fund. I used it to start Technova 5 years ago. You've been working for me the entire time." Brandon grabbed the edge of his desk. "You're lying." "Check your bank accounts," Simone said. "Oh wait, you can't. They've been frozen." "Check the company accounts. Also frozen. Try your credit cards. Frozen. Your passport's been flagged. You can't leave the country. You can't do this." Brandon's voice was rising to a shout. "I'll fight this." "Oh. You'll what?" Simone's voice was ice. "You stole $3 million from my company. You forged documents. You committed wire fraud, bank fraud, and embezzlement. You violated every fiduciary duty you had. I have evidence of everything. Every transaction. Every fake invoice. Every lie." Brandon rushed around the desk toward her. Simone didn't flinch. Security guards appeared in the doorway. Robert had arranged for them to be ready. "Mr. Warren, you need to leave the building," one of them said. "This is my company." Brandon screamed. "This was never your company," Simone said quietly. "And now everyone will know it." The guards escorted Brandon out. His assistant watched in shock. Employees poked their heads out of offices. Simone walked to Brandon's desk and pressed the intercom. "All staff, please gather in the main conference room in 15 minutes for an important announcement." Then she sat down in Brandon's chair, her chair, and waited for her company to assemble. The conference room filled quickly. Simone's employees whispered to each other, confused about Brandon being escorted out. Some looked worried. They depended on their jobs, their salaries. She needed to reassure them. Simone stood at the front of the room and waited for silence. When all eyes were on her, she began. "Good morning. I'm Simone Hart, and I need to tell you the truth about this company. 5 years ago, I wrote the software that became Technova's foundation. I secured the funding. I hired each of you. But I did it quietly, staying in the background while Brandon Warren served as the public face." Confused murmurs spread through the room. Today that changes. As of this morning, Brandon Warren has been terminated for cause. He's been stealing from this company for 2 years. The FBI is investigating. You will likely be interviewed as part of that investigation. Shock rippled through the crowd. Simone raised her hand for quiet. "I want to be clear. Your jobs are safe. The company is financially sound, or it will be once we recover what was stolen. We have strong contracts, excellent products, and a talented team. This is a management problem, not a business problem. A senior developer named Harold raised his hand. Who will run operations? I will, Simone said. I've been managing operations quietly for years. I'll now do it openly. We'll also be hiring a new COO through a proper search. But first we have work to do. She pulled up a presentation on the screen. These are the fake vendor accounts Brandon created. These are the employees who don't exist but received paychecks. This is the money he moved offshore. I need help from accounting and legal to trace everything. Her CFO, Patricia, spoke up. How long has this been happening? 2 years, Simone said. I've been documenting it for 18 months. Why did you wait so long? Someone asked. Because I needed to be thorough. I needed evidence that would stand up in criminal court. I needed to make sure he couldn't destroy records or flee. And I needed to make sure all of you would be protected when the truth came out. The room fell silent as people absorbed this. I know this is shocking, Simone continued. I know some of you considered Brandon a friend. But the evidence is overwhelming. He didn't just steal from me, he stole from all of us. Every dollar he took was a dollar we couldn't invest in growth, in better salaries, and improved benefits. Patricia stood up. What do you need from us? Full cooperation with the investigation. Honest testimony about anything unusual you noticed. And your continued hard work to keep this company running smoothly despite the chaos. You have it, Patricia said. Others nodded. After the meeting, Simone returned to her office, the E. Hart Holdings office she could now claim openly. She found Patricia waiting. I need to see everything, Patricia said. All of it. Simone opened her files. Together they spread out the evidence. Transaction records. Bank statements. Email threads. Forged signatures. Patricia's face grew darker as she reviewed each document. This is worse than I thought. He didn't just steal money. He took out loans against company assets. He mortgaged our intellectual property. If these loans default, we could lose everything. Can we stop it? Simone asked. Maybe. If we can prove fraud, the loans might be voidable. But it will take time and legal action. They worked through lunch, calling banks, contacting creditors, freezing additional accounts. By afternoon, they had a complete picture of the damage. Brandon had stolen $3.2 million directly. He'd also obligated the company to $5 million in fraudulent loans. Total damage, over $8 million. This will bankrupt us, Patricia said quietly. No, Simone said. It won't. I'm transferring $10 million from E. Hart Holdings to cover everything. We'll treat it as an emergency capital infusion. Can you afford that? Yes. My trust fund is larger than Brandon ever knew. The company will be fine. We just need to recover what we can and make sure he faces consequences. Patricia looked at her with newfound respect. You've been protecting us this whole time. I've been protecting what my mother built, Simone said. She died when I was 25. My father and his business partners destroyed her company within a year, fighting over the pieces. I swore I'd never let that happen to something I created. Is that why you hid your ownership? Partly. Also because I knew Brandon was ambitious. I wanted to see if he'd stay honest when he thought he had power. He didn't. As evening approached, FBI agents arrived. Special Agent Wilson introduced himself and his partner. Mrs. Warren, we've reviewed the materials your lawyer sent. This is a substantial case. We'll need to interview you formally, examine your evidence, and build a complete timeline. I have everything you need, Simone said. They spent 3 hours going through every detail. Simone walked them through the company structure, the theft pattern, the offshore accounts, the fake vendors. She showed them emails where Brandon discussed his plans with Natasha. This Natasha Coleman, Agent Wilson said. She works for TechVision, correct? Yes. One of our competitors. And money flowed from your company to accounts she controlled, then to TechVision? Yes. That's corporate espionage. This just became a much bigger case. Agent Wilson's partner made notes. We'll need to interview employees, examine computers, review all company communications. This will take months. Whatever you need, Simone said. After they left, she sat alone in her office. The city lights sparkled below. She felt exhausted but satisfied. The wheels were in motion. Justice was coming. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're making a huge mistake. Stop this now and we can work something out. Brandon. Using someone else's phone since his was probably seized. Simone deleted the message without responding. Another text. I can destroy you. I have friends. Connections. You have no idea who you're messing with. She blocked the number. A third text from yet another number. Please. Can we just talk? We can work this out. I made mistakes, but so did you. You lied about the company ownership. Simone stared at that message. The audacity of it. He'd stolen millions, betrayed her, planned to humiliate her, and now he claimed she was the one who'd done wrong? She typed a response. See you in court. Then she turned off her phone and went back to work. There was so much to do. Company to rebuild. Trust to restore. A new chapter to write. But first, she needed to make sure Brandon faced the full consequences of his choices. Brandon stood outside the house he'd shared with Simone for 3 years. His hands shook as he tried to unlock the door. The key didn't work. She changed the locks. He pounded on the door. Simone, open up. We need to talk. Silence. He walked around to the back. The patio door was also locked. Through the window he could see the living room. Empty. Furniture gone. Pictures removed. Nothing left but bare walls. She'd taken everything. Brandon pulled out his phone to call her, then remembered his phone had been confiscated by the FBI. He was using a burner phone he'd bought at a convenience store with the cash in his wallet, the only money he had access to. All his accounts were frozen. His credit cards declined. His car had been seized. He'd borrowed this car from Natasha. Natasha. He needed to talk to her. She'd know what to do. He drove to her apartment. She answered the door in a bathrobe, looking annoyed. What are you doing here? She asked. Everything's falling apart, Brandon said, pushing past her into the apartment. Simone's frozen all my money. She's claiming she owns the company. The FBI is investigating. You need to help me. Natasha crossed her arms. Help you? Brandon, I told you to be careful. I told you she might be smarter than you thought. You said she was clueless. You said she'd never figure it out. I said she seemed clueless. There's a difference. Natasha walked to her kitchen and poured coffee. She didn't offer him any. What exactly does she have on you? Everything. Transaction records. Emails. Bank statements. She's been watching me for months. How is that possible? You were careful. She owns the company. Brandon shouted. She's been E-Heart Holdings this whole time. She funded everything. I've been working for her. Natasha's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. What? Her mother was Evelyn Hart, the tech pioneer. Simone had a trust fund. She used it to start Technova. I never knew. Natasha set down her coffee carefully. So when you were stealing from the company, I was stealing from her. Directly from her. And the money you gave me to invest in Tech Vision was stolen from her company. Natasha was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to her door and opened it. You need to leave. What? No. We're in this together. We were in a mutually beneficial arrangement, Natasha said coldly. You got money. I got inside information on your company's technology. It worked while you were smart about it. But you got greedy. You got sloppy. And now you're facing federal charges. You helped me. You're part of this. I invested money you gave me. How was I supposed to know it was stolen? Her smile was sharp. I'm a victim here too. You deceived me just like you deceived your wife. Brandon stared at her. You're going to throw me under the bus. I'm going to protect myself. Like any smart person would. She gestured to the hallway. Leave. Don't contact me again. If the FBI asks, I'll tell them you manipulated me. That I had no idea about the fraud. You knew everything. Prove it. She slammed the door in his face. Brandon stood in the hallway, shaking. Everyone was abandoning him. His wife. His mistress. His company. His life. He drove aimlessly, trying to think. He needed a lawyer, but lawyers required money. His accounts were frozen. His assets seized. He had maybe $300 in his wallet. He checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room was dingy, nothing like the luxury he'd grown accustomed to. He sat on the stained bedspread and tried to figure out his next move. His burner phone rang. An unknown number. Hello. Mr. Warren, this is Special Agent Wilson with the FBI. We need you to come in for an interview. I need a lawyer first. That's your right. But the interview is mandatory. You can come voluntarily or we can arrest you. Your choice. Brandon's stomach dropped. When? Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Federal Building downtown. The line went dead. Brandon threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. He'd lost everything in less than 24 hours. His company. His home. His money. His mistress. And tomorrow he'd probably lose his freedom. All because he'd underestimated Simone. He'd thought she was weak, naive, easy to manipulate. He'd thought her smiles and trust meant she was stupid. Instead, she'd been watching, planning, building a case, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She'd beaten him completely. Later that night, Brandon tried one more time. He drove to the Technova offices. Maybe he could get inside. Maybe he could destroy evidence or access accounts or something. Security stopped him at the front desk. "Sorry, sir. You're not authorized to be here." "I'm the COO. "Not anymore. We have orders to call the police if you try to enter the building." Brandon drove back to his motel. He sat in the parking lot for an hour, staring at nothing. How had this happened? 6 months ago, he'd been on top of the world. Successful company. Beautiful house. Money. Power. A plan to have even more. Now he had nothing. Except consequences. Tomorrow he'd face the FBI. Soon he'd face criminal charges. Eventually he'd face trial. And through it all, Simone would be there, watching him fall, knowing she'd orchestrated everything. He thought about running, taking the $300 and disappearing. But his passport was flagged. His face would be on watch list. He'd be caught within days. There was no way out. Brandon went into his motel room and lay on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. For the first time in his life, he understood what real fear felt like. Not fear of losing money or status. Fear of losing everything. His future. His freedom. His very identity. And he'd done it to himself. Every choice. Every theft. Every lie. They'd all led here. To this shabby motel room. To federal charges. To complete and total ruin. And Simone had let him do it. She'd watched him dig his own grave and waited until he'd climbed all the way down before filling it in. She was brilliant, ruthless, unforgiving. Everything he'd claimed to be but wasn't. He'd married her thinking he was the predator and she was the prey. He'd been so very, very wrong. 3 days later, Simone called an emergency board meeting. Technova's board consisted of herself, secretly, 2 venture capital representatives, an industry expert, and Brandon. Or rather, it had included Brandon. Now there was an empty chair. The 4 other board members sat around the polished table. They'd received briefing documents about Brandon's termination but wanted details. "Let's begin," Simone said, standing at the head of the table. "First, I need to clarify something about this company's ownership structure." She pulled up a presentation. The first slide showed Technova's official ownership breakdown. As you all know, eHeart Holdings owns 60% of Technova. I own 20% personally. The remaining 20% is split between Brandon Warren and key employees. Heads nodded. This was public knowledge. "What you don't know," Simone continued, "is that I am eHeart Holdings." Silence. Then one of the VC representatives, Thomas, spoke up. "I'm sorry, what?" "eHeart Holdings is a trust one created using my inheritance from my mother, Evelyn Hart. I've owned 60% of this company since day one." The industry expert Monica leaned forward. "Why hide it?" "Protection. My mother was a tech pioneer who died young. Her company was destroyed by infighting after her death. I wasn't going to let that happen to mine." "You didn't trust your husband?" Thomas asked. "I trusted him with my heart," Simone said. "But I didn't trust anyone with my company. That decision saved Technova." She clicked to the next slide. "Brandon Warren has been embezzling from this company for 2 years. He's stolen $3.2 million directly and obligated us to $5 million in fraudulent loans. Total damage, $8.3 million. The board erupted. Questions flew. Simone raised her hand. "I have complete documentation. The FBI is investigating. Brandon was terminated for cause, which voids his ownership stake per our operating agreement. His shares revert to the company." Monica looked shaken. "How did we miss this?" "He was careful," Simone said. "He created fake vendors, approved fake expenses, and moved money through shell corporations. But I was watching. I've been documenting everything for 18 months. Why did you wait so long?" Thomas demanded. "You let him steal for a year and a half? I needed a complete case. If I'd confronted him early, he could have destroyed evidence, fled the country, or hidden assets. I waited until I had everything locked down." Thomas looked skeptical. "That seems excessive." "Brandon wasn't just stealing," Simone said. "He was also sharing our intellectual property with TechVision through his girlfriend, Natasha Coleman. This was corporate espionage. I needed to prove the full scope of the conspiracy. That got their attention. Corporate espionage was serious." "How much IP did he share?" Monica asked. Enough that TechVision's last 3 product releases suspiciously mirror our development roadmap. We're pursuing legal action against them as well. Simone clicked through more slides. Financial records, email chains, bank transfers. The evidence was overwhelming. By the end of the presentation, the board looked grim. What's our financial position? Thomas asked. Stable. I've injected $10 million from eHeart Holdings to cover losses and maintain operations. We're current on all legitimate obligations. Our clients are unaffected. What about reputation damage? Minimal so far. I've been meeting with our major clients personally, explaining the situation. They appreciate our transparency and the fact that we caught this ourselves. Monica nodded slowly. You've handled this well. Better than well, actually. But I have to ask, why reveal yourself now? You could have stayed hidden. Because hiding is no longer necessary, Simone said. Brandon is facing criminal charges. The theft is public record. And I'm tired of staying in the shadows of my own company. It's time for Technova to know who really built it. The board voted unanimously to ratify Brandon's termination, approve Simone's capital infusion, and officially recognize her as majority owner and CEO. After the meeting, Thomas pulled her aside. For what it's worth, I'm impressed. Most people would have fallen apart. You turned it into a strategic victory. I had good teachers, Simone said. My mother taught me to protect what's mine. Brandon taught me not to trust appearances. What happens next? We rebuild. We grow. We become what we were always meant to be, a company that succeeds on merit, not manipulation. Over the next week, Simone met with every department. She explained the situation. She answered questions. She made it clear that Brandon's crimes were his alone. The employees responded better than she'd hoped. Shock gave way to anger at Brandon, then determination to prove Technova was stronger than one bad actor. Productivity actually increased. People worked harder as if to prove they deserved their jobs. Morale improved as Simone's presence became more visible. She was a different kind of leader than Brandon. She didn't schmooze or charm. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep. She simply did the work and expected others to do the same. It worked. Technova's stock price, they'd gone public 2 years ago, initially dipped when news of Brandon's arrest broke. But after Simone's public statement explaining the situation and the financial safeguards, it recovered. Then it climbed higher than before. Investors liked the new transparency. They liked having a technical expert as CEO rather than a smooth-talking salesman. They liked the company's solid fundamentals. Within 2 weeks, Technova was stronger than ever. But Simone's work wasn't done. Brandon's criminal case was just beginning, and she intended to see it through to the end. Brandon's lawyer was a public defender named James Patterson, a tired man with too many cases and not enough time. The evidence against you is substantial, James said during their first meeting. The FBI has transaction records, emails, witness testimony, multiple felony counts. You're looking at significant prison time. How much time? Brandon asked. 10 to 20 years. Maybe more if they add the corporate espionage charges. Brandon's face went white. There has to be a way out. A deal. Something. There might be. If you cooperate. Tell them everything. About Natasha. About TechVision. About anyone else involved. I can't do that. Then you're going to prison for a very long time. Brandon left the meeting in a daze. 10 to 20 years. He'd be in his 50s when he got out. His life would be over. He tried calling old friends, former colleagues, people who'd laughed at his jokes and accepted his dinner invitations. No one answered. Or if they did, they made excuses and hung up quickly. He was toxic now, associated with fraud and theft. No one wanted to be near him. His parents refused to help. His father had said, "You made your choices. Live with them." His brother said, "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. Guess you weren't." Even his college roommate, his oldest friend, said, "I can't be associated with this. I have a career to think about." Brandon was completely alone. Natasha, meanwhile, had hired an expensive lawyer and was claiming total innocence. She told investigators that Brandon had deceived her, that she'd thought the money was legitimate, that she'd had no idea about the embezzlement. Without proof of her knowledge, Brandon had been careful not to put details in emails. The FBI couldn't charge her with conspiracy. She'd get away clean. TechVision claimed ignorance too. Yes, Natasha had provided information, but she claimed it was general industry knowledge, not stolen IP. Proving otherwise would require a separate civil lawsuit that could take years. Brandon realized he was the only one who'd face consequences. Everyone else had protected themselves. He thought about Simone's planning. She'd protected herself too. Better than anyone. She'd hidden her ownership, documented his crimes, built an impeccable case. And she'd never confronted him directly, never given him a chance to talk his way out or destroy evidence. She'd beaten him with patience and preparation. Meanwhile, his entire world was collapsing. The IRS opened an investigation into his unreported income. The SEC was looking into possible securities fraud. The State Bar Association, he'd passed the bar years ago but never practiced, was considering disciplinary action. Civil lawsuits piled up. Simone was suing him personally for the stolen money. Technova was suing him. His creditors were suing him. Even his landlord, he put down a deposit on a luxury apartment he never moved into, was suing him. Every aspect of his life was unraveling. He sold his watch, his laptop, his designer clothes, anything of value. The money went to his lawyer and cheap motel rooms. He took a job washing dishes at a diner. Minimum wage. The kind of work he'd sneered at his entire life. His co-workers were mostly teenagers and immigrants. They didn't know who he was. They didn't care. He was just the new guy who worked the evening shift. It was humiliating. But it was all he could get. No one else would hire him. One night, as he scrubbed grease off plates, Brandon caught a news story on the diner's television. Simone was being interviewed about Technova's latest product launch. She looked powerful, confident, beautiful in a sharp business suit. After uncovering internal fraud, the reporter said, "You've turned Technova around. What's your secret?" "Honesty," Simone said. "We build products that work. We treat our employees fairly. We keep our promises. It's not complicated. And your ex-husband's trial begins next month." Any comment? "I hope justice is served," Simone said simply. "For everyone he stole from." Brandon turned away from the television. His hands shook as he scrubbed another plate. She'd won. Completely. Utterly. He'd been erased from the company, from the industry, from the life he'd built. And she was thriving. The trial date approached. Brandon's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecution offered 7 years in exchange for full cooperation and restitution. "I can't pay restitution," Brandon said. "I don't have the money." "Then the offer is off the table. We go to trial." "What are my chances?" James looked at him with something like pity. "Honestly? None. The evidence is overwhelming. The jury will convict. You'll get the maximum sentence. So I should take the deal." "Yes. 7 years is better than 20. But Brandon's pride wouldn't let him. He'd been so sure he was clever, so confident in his abilities. Admitting defeat felt impossible. "I want to go to trial," he said. James sighed. "That's your right. But you're making a mistake." Brandon knew it was a mistake. But he couldn't bring himself to admit out loud that Simone had beaten him. That she'd been smarter. That his entire scheme had been visible to her from the beginning. So he'd go to trial. And he'd lose. And he'd spend decades in prison. But at least he wouldn't have to say the words. At least he could pretend, right up until the verdict, that he still had a chance. Even though they both knew the truth. Simone had destroyed him. And he'd helped her do it. FBI Special Agent Wilson had seen a lot of white-collar crime cases. Embezzlement. Fraud. Insider trading. They all followed similar patterns. But the Technova case was different. Usually, the victim discovered the crime by accident. A missing payment, a suspicious transaction, something that raised flags. Then they brought in investigators to figure out what happened. Simone Hart had done the opposite. She'd discovered the crime, investigated it herself, built a complete case, and only then brought in law enforcement. "Most impressive thing I've seen in 20 years, Wilson told his partner as they reviewed the files. "She handed us a gift-wrapped conviction. The evidence was meticulous. Transaction records with timestamps. Emails with metadata. Bank statements with highlighted transfers. Everything organized, annotated, and cross-referenced." Wilson had interviewed dozens of Technova employees. They all said the same thing. Simone was brilliant, detail-oriented, and fair. Brandon had been charming but lazy, taking credit for others' work. The pattern fit. Narcissist sees opportunity. Marries into power. Starts stealing. Gets caught. Except Simone had let him keep stealing. For 18 months. Why did she wait so long? Wilson's partner asked. She could have stopped him earlier. She wanted a complete case, Wilson said. Most victims confront immediately. The suspect destroys evidence, lawyers up, and we spend years piecing together fragments. Simone gave us everything. They'd also uncovered the TechVision connection. Natasha Coleman had received money from Brandon, then invested it in her employer's stock. But proving she knew it was stolen would be difficult. "She's claiming ignorance," Wilson's partner said. "Says Brandon told her it was legitimate investment income. Do you believe her?" "No. But we can't prove she's lying." It was frustrating. Natasha had clearly known about the scheme. But Brandon had been smart enough, barely, not to put incriminating details in writing. They interviewed Natasha multiple times. She stuck to her story. She was shocked, devastated. She trusted Brandon. Her expensive lawyer made sure she said nothing useful. TechVision claimed ignorance too. They'd hired Natasha for her industry expertise, not for any stolen information. If she'd happened to know things about competitors, well, that was just good hiring. Without concrete proof, the FBI couldn't charge them. It annoyed Wilson. The whole conspiracy was obvious. But obvious wasn't enough for prosecution. They focused on what they could prove: Brandon's theft, his fraud, his embezzlement. Multiple felony counts. Enough to put him away for decades. The case went to a grand jury. They indicted Brandon on 17 counts. Wire fraud, bank fraud, embezzlement, forgery, identity theft. Each count carried significant prison time. Brandon's public defender tried to negotiate a plea deal. 7 years. Brandon refused. His ego won't let him admit defeat, Wilson told his team. He'd rather risk 20 years than admit his ex-wife outsmarted him. They prepared for trial. Witness lists, evidence catalogs, expert testimony. The case was solid. Simone was their key witness. She'd testify about the company structure, the theft pattern, the evidence collection. Wilson met with her to prepare. Defense will try to discredit you. They'll claim you're a scorned ex-wife, that this is about revenge, not justice. Let them try, Simone said calmly. I have spreadsheets, transaction records, emails. The evidence speaks for itself. They might claim you entrapped him somehow, that you set him up to fail. I gave him a job. I paid him well. I trusted him with company operations. He chose to steal. That's not entrapment. Wilson nodded. She was right. And she'd make an excellent witness. Calm, factual, credible. The defense would have a hard time shaking her. They also interviewed Technova employees. Everyone confirmed Simone's account. Brandon had approved fake vendors, authorized suspicious transfers, claimed business expenses that were actually personal. One accountant had questioned a payment once. Brandon had told her it was approved by the owner, and she shouldn't worry about it. Did you believe him? Wilson asked. At the time, yes. He was the CEO. I assumed he knew what he was doing. And now I realize he was lying. There was no owner approval. He just wanted access to money. Similar stories from other employees. Small irregularities they'd noticed but dismissed. Brandon's explanations that seemed reasonable at the time but made sense as lies in retrospect. The pattern was clear. Systematic theft. Deliberate fraud. No ambiguity. As the trial date approached, Wilson felt confident. This was a winner. The jury would convict easily. But one thing bothered him. Simone had never seemed angry. Most victims of financial crime were furious. They wanted revenge. They wanted to see the perpetrator suffer. Simone just wanted justice. Don't you hate him? Wilson asked during one of their preparation sessions. Simone considered the question. I hate what he did. I hate that he lied to me, stole from me, planned to destroy me. But hate him personally? No. That would give him too much power over my emotions. Most people in your position would want him to suffer. I want him to face appropriate consequences. That's not the same as wanting him to suffer. The system will handle him. I need to focus on rebuilding my company and my life. Wilson found that remarkable. And a little bit scary. Simone Hart had turned her husband's betrayal into a strategic victory. She'd protected her company, caught the criminal, and emerged stronger than before. She was the perfect victim for prosecution. Credible, calm, and completely in control. Brandon Warren never stood a chance against her. And in a few weeks, a jury would agree. While Brandon's legal troubles consumed him, Simone was building something new. She'd restructured Technova's leadership team, bringing in fresh talent and promoting from within. The new COO was Patricia, her CFO, who'd proven herself during the crisis. The new head of sales was Harold, the senior developer who'd stepped up when Brandon left. The company culture shifted. Less about image and more about substance. Less about who you knew and more about what you could do. Employees noticed. Morale improved. Turnover decreased. People wanted to work at Technova again. Simone also started something new, the Heart Foundation for Financial Empowerment. I was lucky, she told the foundation's first board meeting. I had resources to protect myself. Most people don't. I want to help those people. The foundation would provide free legal aid to victims of financial abuse. It would offer financial literacy training. It would connect women with resources to leave bad situations safely. Simone funded it personally with $5 million from her trust fund. Other donors joined quickly. The foundation was fully operational within 3 months. Their first client was a woman named Claire whose husband had drained their joint accounts and taken out credit cards in her name. The foundation's lawyers helped her secure an emergency injunction, freeze the fraudulent accounts, and file for divorce with full asset protection. I didn't know I had options, Claire told Simone tearfully. I thought I was stuck. You saved my life. You saved your own life, Simone said. We just gave you the tools. Stories like Claire's motivated Simone. She turned her pain into purpose, her experience into expertise, her loss into others' gain. The foundation grew quickly. Within 6 months they'd helped 50 women. Within a year, hundreds. Simone also made changes in her personal life. She bought a new house, smaller than the one she'd shared with Brandon but truly hers. She decorated it herself. Every item was chosen deliberately. No memories of betrayal. Just fresh starts. She reconnected with old friends she'd neglected during her marriage. She took a painting class. She joined a book club. She remembered who she'd been before Brandon. And then she met James. He was a software engineer at a company Technova partnered with. They met at a tech conference. He approached her after her keynote speech. That was brilliant, he said. Especially the part about building ethical tech companies. We need more leaders who think like that. They talked for an hour. About technology. About business ethics. About the responsibility of tech companies to their users. James was different from Brandon. Genuine. Thoughtful. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He didn't try to impress her or sell himself. He was just real. They exchanged numbers. Started texting. Met for coffee. Simone was cautious. After Brandon, trusting someone felt dangerous. But James was patient. He didn't push. When she said she needed to take things slow, he said, "Of course. Whatever you need." They dated casually for 3 months before Simone felt ready to be serious. Even then, she kept parts of herself protected. Some walls were necessary. James understood. You went through something terrible. Trust takes time. I'm not going anywhere. He proved it. When the media covered Brandon's trial, James stood beside her. When reporters asked intrusive questions, he helped her deflect. When she had bad days, he brought dinner and listened. He never tried to fix her. He never acted like her trauma was his to solve. He just supported her as she healed herself. It was exactly what she needed. 6 months into their relationship, Simone told him about Heart Holdings. About her hidden ownership. About how she protected herself. Smart, James said. Given what happened, you were right to be careful. You're not upset I kept secrets? You kept yourself safe. That's not the same as lying. You don't owe anyone access to your financial information. Simone felt something loosen in her chest. Brandon would have been angry. Would have accused her of not trusting him. Would have made it about his ego. James just understood. She realized this was what a healthy relationship felt like. Respect. Support. Space to be herself. Meanwhile, Technova continued to grow. They landed 3 major contracts. They expanded into new markets. Their stock price climbed steadily. Industry publications ran features on Simone, the CEO who caught a thief. How one woman saved her company. From betrayal to triumph. She did interviews carefully. She didn't want to be defined by Brandon's crimes. She wanted to be known for her work. But the story resonated with people, especially women. They saw themselves in her experience, not the specific details maybe, but the broader pattern. Being underestimated. Being betrayed. Fighting back. Simone received hundreds of emails. Women thanking her for being public about financial abuse. Women sharing their own stories. Women asking for advice. She couldn't respond to all of them, but she tried. And the ones she couldn't respond to personally, the Heart Foundation helped. Her life was full now. Meaningful. She had work she believed in, relationships she valued, and a future she'd built for herself. Brandon had tried to take everything from her. Instead, he'd freed her to become someone stronger. She almost felt grateful. Almost. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Simone attended every day, sitting in the gallery behind the prosecution table. Brandon sat at the defense table, thinner than she remembered. Tired. Scared. Good. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Transaction records. Bank statements. Email chains. Expert testimony from forensic accountants. Simone testified for 6 hours. She walked the jury through the company structure, the theft pattern, the evidence collection. Brandon's lawyer tried to rattle her during cross-examination. Isn't it true you hid your ownership from your husband? Yes. Because you didn't trust him? I didn't trust anyone with that information. It was a business decision, not a personal one. A business decision to deceive your spouse? I didn't deceive him. I chose to keep certain business information private. That's my right. You're a very controlling person, aren't you, Mrs. Hart? I'm a careful person. There's a difference. You documented his supposed crimes for 18 months without saying anything. Doesn't that seem vindictive? No. It seems thorough. I wanted to make sure I had complete evidence before taking action. Or you wanted to trap him. To punish him for some perceived slight. Simone looked directly at the jury. My ex-husband stole over $3 million from my company. He forged documents. He committed fraud. The evidence proves this beyond any doubt. Whether I'm controlling or vindictive or anything else is irrelevant. The facts are the facts. The jury nodded. They believed her. Brandon testified in his own defense. Was a mistake. He tried to claim the money was compensation he'd earned. That he'd built the company with his connections and his work. The prosecution shredded him with his own emails. Messages where he'd discussed hiding transactions. Where he'd joked about Simone being clueless. Where he'd planned to humiliate her. Did you write this email? The prosecutor asked, showing Brandon a message where he'd told Natasha he was playing the long game to get control of the company. Yes, but... And this one, where you said your wife was too trusting to see what's happening? That was taken out of context. What context would make these statements acceptable, Mr. Warren? Brandon had no answer. The defense rested. Closing arguments began. The prosecutor was devastating. Brandon Warren didn't just betray his wife. He betrayed every employee at Technova. He betrayed his investors. He betrayed the basic principles of trust and honesty that business depends on. And he did it deliberately, methodically, over 2 years. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendant's own words condemn him. Your duty is clear. Find him guilty on all counts. The defense tried to argue reasonable doubt. Suggested Simone had somehow manipulated the evidence. Claimed Brandon had made mistakes but not committed crimes. The jury wasn't buying it. Deliberations took 4 hours. They returned with verdicts. Guilty. 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 All 17 counts. Brandon's face went white. His mother, sitting behind him, started crying. His lawyer patted his shoulder with no real sympathy. Simone felt nothing. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just relief. It was over. Sentencing came 2 months later. Simone attended but didn't speak. The prosecution and victims presented statements. Technova employees testified about the harm to their workplace. The Hart Foundation brought in clients whose stories echoed Brandon's crimes. The judge listened to everything. Then he looked at Brandon. Mr. Warren, you had every advantage. Education. Opportunity. A successful career. And you threw it away out of greed. You betrayed people who trusted you. You stole from a company you claimed to help build. You showed no remorse, no conscience, no consideration for anyone but yourself. You will serve 18 years in federal prison. You will pay full restitution of $3.2 million plus interest. You will forfeit all assets. And you are permanently barred from serving as an officer or director of any public company. I hope you use this time to reflect on your choices. Because those choices have consequences. And today you're facing them. The bailiff led Brandon away. He looked back once at Simone. She met his eyes but didn't react. She had nothing left to say to him. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Simone gave a brief statement. Justice has been served. Technova is thriving. The Hart Foundation continues to help victims of financial abuse. I'm focused on the future, not the past. She walked away with James beside her. He held her hand. How do you feel? He asked. Done, Simone said. I'm done with all of it. Brandon. The trial. The drama. I just want to move forward. Then let's do that. That evening, Simone stood in her office at Technova. The E. Hart Holdings office she now openly claimed. She looked out over the city lights. 18 months ago, she'd stood in almost this same spot, planning her strategy. preparing for war, building her case. Now that war was over. 1. Brandon was in prison. Technova was flourishing. The Heart Foundation was changing lives. And she was finally truly free. She'd built something better than revenge. She'd built a life. A life based on honesty, not deception. On strength, not manipulation. On genuine connection, not calculated charm. Brandon had tried to destroy her. Instead, he destroyed himself. And she'd emerged stronger than ever. Simone closed her laptop and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, Technova would launch a new product. The Heart Foundation would open a second office. James would come over for dinner. Tomorrow was full of possibility. But tonight, she'd simply enjoy the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd won. Not by destroying Brandon, he'd done that himself. But by building something better. Something real. Something lasting. She'd turned betrayal into purpose. Pain into power. Loss into legacy. And that was the best revenge of all.